All right, welcome everyone. My name again is Corinne Zaragoza Estrella. I am the Outreach Coordinator at the UNC-DUKE Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. And we are offering this week a virtual professional development series for educators and those working with students and their families from Latin America originally. And today's session this morning is how administrators can create welcoming schools for Latino or Latina students. I am joined today by the true experts in welcoming Latin American immigrants and their families into schools. We have today with us Dr. Emily Bivins, who is a retired principal of Frank Portogram Bilingual Elementary in Chapel Hill. We are also joined by Joe Eno, who is an assistant principal at Enloe High School in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we are joined by the principal of Lakewood Elementary School in Durham, James Hopkins. So please help me welcome these fabulous administrators who are taking some time during a very crazy back to school season to be with us today to speak about how they work with students in their school. So welcome, thank you so much for being with us today. Before we get started, I guess my first question is just to ask you all to tell us about your school and the families and community it serves. I figure ladies first, Emily. Could you please start us off, please?
Sure. Well, I'm Emily Bivins. I am actually now the retired principal of FPG Bilingual in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it is a dual language magnet school for pre-K through 5th grade students. The school serves about 600 students, and about 300 of them are native Spanish speakers, primarily coming from Central America. We have first, second, and third generation of immigrants. Most of our Spanish-speaking students are living in poverty, and we have a scattering of access to community resources related to food scarcity, health, mental health, legal services, related to how the students get support. But we are a magnet school in Chapel Hill.
Very nice, thank you. And could we go with Joe? Could you tell us a little bit about Enloe High School and the students you serve there?
Yes, Enloe is a magnet high school, so we draw students from around Wake County, and we are currently, I think, just above 2460. So it's a quite large school, extremely diverse. It's a arts and science magnet school. And as of last year, we had 130 students who were English learners. And we have, I would say, around 35% white, 28% Black, and then Asian is about 23%.
Great, thank you. And James, can you tell us about Lakewood Elementary School?
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me. Very honored to share anything I can offer to support the conversation. So Lakewood Elementary School, we have about 415 students, of which 56% come from Spanish-speaking homes. We have the highest percentage of students that come from Spanish-speaking homes in the district. 98.8% free and reduced lunch across the board. In addition to those Spanish-speaking families, we have 12 additional languages that are spoken within the school. And because we have the highest percentage of students coming from Spanish-speaking homes, we are in our 3rd year as a dual immersion school. And so a lot of our families, our Spanish-speaking families, feel like this is a place where they can really thrive and feel very much a part of the community.
Great, thank you so much, great. So my next question for you all is, how do you create a school environment and culture that is supportive and inclusive of Latino students and their families? What are some of the initiatives that your school has taken? I know some of your schools especially were not always dual language schools. So how did you decide to come about those changes? We'll start off with James on this one.
Sure, yeah. Two things. We did a listening project a couple years back, and we made a concerted effort to really ensure that we were getting that qualitative data from our Spanish-speaking families. Mm-hmm. These are families that are typically underrepresented anytime there is a survey that goes out. And so one of the things we did is parents are walking their students in, we'd ask them for 15 minutes of their time We ask questions like, what are your dreams for your child? What is the perfect school look like to you? And we basically compiled all that into huge data spreadsheet and created goal teams for our staff to work on. From those goal teams, we quickly realized that our families, our Spanish-speaking families, wanted to be more of a voice in our PTA meetings. This was the venue, this was the forum that they could actually share ideas. And so we learned that we need three things at a PTA meeting. We need food, we need a very strong agenda, a very interactive agenda, and we needed Spanish interpretation. I'm sorry, four things, and then childcare. So once we were able to put those in place, our PTA meetings, I think we had 62 families that came, and we had, most of them were Spanish speaking. And so some of the feedback that we've received from that is that Spanish speaking families, they're like any other family, right? I got to be careful how I say this, but they have really, everyone has great ideas, but to finally listen to an underrepresented demographic was game changing. And we proceeded to pursue different sidebar conversations. We actually had one parent lead one of our parent recruitment nights, Miss Maria. She stays up the street, but just, I would say in short, making sure that you have data to support what Spanish families want, and then develop a plan to ensure that they get it, and then continue to track to see if that's exactly what it is they would love to continue to work with.
Excellent. That's great advice. Thank you. Excellent. Emily, since we're talking about elementary schools, can you talk about what FPG did and has done to incorporate, to create a climate and culture that is inclusive of Latino students and their families?
Well, the whole school is a dual language magnet school, so families opt to come there. And I think one of the things that sets FPG apart is when you walk in the building, the signage, the displays, the flags, the artwork, you feel like you're in a bilingual school. And about 90% of the staff are bilingual. And if you are not bilingual, we have supported you in getting at least enough survival language where you can say, hello, how are you? And let me get you the help that you need. The school staff is very diverse, but helping them to understand where our children and families come from, because many of our Spanish-speaking teachers come from Spain, from other parts of South America, not necessarily from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, where many of our students and their families are coming from. So it was important for our teachers to understand, even though they shared a language, that they needed to understand where the families were coming from. We also did a tremendous amount of parent outreach with home visitations for every incoming kindergarten student, and then for targeted students after that. And at first, families were sometimes embarrassed to let you come into their home. But usually teachers came back from those home visits having learned far more about how to support the child and that family better than what information they gave to the family on the flip side of that. So I think home visits and really building those relationships is really important. We also provided one of our elective classes on language and culture, and it was taught in Spanish, but really to highlight and elevate the status of the Spanish language and culture through that elective class. We could have taught anything as an elective class. We could have added a third language. We could have had a dance class. We could have had a number of things, but we chose to have a culture class that integrated many artistic things in it, but certainly elevated the status of the Spanish culture. The other thing that I thought was really important at FPG was providing some opportunity for affinity activities. James talked about really that inclusivity with the PTA and how to really make sure the families feel connected, and that is so important. But we also found that families wanted some opportunity to have affinity. So there were parent education classes that were taught only in Spanish. There were mental health sessions that were done for families kind of based on perhaps their journey into the United United States and some of the traumas that they may have experienced related to that, but really having some opportunity and time for affinity was also important.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic. Great. And one of your counselors, Barbie, is going to be presenting on, what's today? Today's Tuesday, right? I believe she's presenting on tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. She'll be presenting about the Mariposas affinity group, which is a really, I think it turned out from an after-school club to a whole nonprofit now it's kind of turned into. So she's going to be speaking tomorrow. I'll give everyone some more information about that at the end of the session. So thank you. Yeah, it is. And Joe, can you talk a little bit at the high school level? I know I've worked in both elementary and high schools tend to have this kind of idea that it's a lot harder to reach families and to include families than it is at the elementary level. So can you talk a little bit about how you make students and families feel included at the high school level?
Sure. I can start by just mentioning quickly that the district, it's a very large district, and we have known that there's been an influx across the county in English language learners. And so, as we look at the data, as mentioned before, we noticed that was a subgroup of students who were underperforming. So we knew we had to do something. And we identified exactly who they are, and started to work. Enloe High School started to work closely with the district. We're super lucky that the district has made it part of their core beliefs, and it's really ingrained in all of our meetings that we have in terms of, I would say, not just the core beliefs, but school improvement team. And we want to make sure that it's something that we put in writing that we want to, something that we need to address and want to address. So we put this right in the forefront at all times. And by doing that, it kind of allows you, kind of gives you the green light to do what you can do. So at Enloe High School, there's several things that we do. First of all, I think we concentrate on hiring good people. So when you talk about stakeholders and buy-in or / commitment, we think that hiring is one of the most important things. So we look at people who are committed to kids in general, and notice that when we do that, they work real hard for any student, and we've had great luck with that. The connection to the county, to the district, is huge as well. So I personally attend county meetings, 2 different ones, so that I can get the most updated information and bring it back to the school. As well as I have one group that has presented at the state level, and then we've attended a national conference. So we try to stay just up to date as much as possible and bring that information back to the school. One thing we've really had a lot of luck with is our family academies. So we work directly with the county on that as well. Our family academies, we've had up to 35 to 40 parents at them. Again, food does help, and we do that. We invite the whole family, and so they all come in and meet us, and we have interpreters there. Most of our families, 90% are Latino, and 10% come from African countries. So we support all of those students and their families. Another success that we've had are focus groups. So we've actually given sort of an avenue, or for kids to be able to share about themselves and what's unique to them. And students first started out super shy, and eventually were able to learn that their opinion matters, their advice matters, they matter, they have a lot to give. And we made a video toward the end of the year, and I was just shocked and blown away by how well they did. And the video has to do with sharing with teachers really what they think great teachers do. And the pandemic came about, and we hadn't really gone much further with that. But our ESL teachers are just super active. They're out in the hallways. We continue to reach out as much as possible, and I think that a lot of it has to do with advertising also. We make sure that people know that this matters. So our principal is someone who's on board, school board is on board. Again, the family academies is just a way to make it happen. We've tried reaching out by going into the community, didn't have a lot of luck. So we've kind of scaled back, went back to the high school, and we invite them in. We have a long way to go, but we're starting to see progress there.
That's great, great. So Joe, you actually mentioned a keyword, stakeholders, right? When you were talking about your answer, and I wanted to ask everyone kind of a question regarding that. So Joe, you mentioned hiring good people as part of getting, bringing in more stakeholders into helping working with students. But how do you create buy-in from other stakeholders, teachers maybe who were already working at the school have been working at the school for a long time, who maybe aren't as invested in working with ESL students? How do you get families on board? How do you get students on board? Especially, you know, at the high school level can be challenging. How do you work with all these different stakeholders to get everyone together on the same page?
Well, we have a extremely strong staff at the district level who reach out on a regular basis, and that helps tremendously. And what we've created is the sheltered classrooms. So we have trained, I think it's, right now we're up to 12 to 13 sheltered instructors that we have. And they teach, next year they're going to be teaching 22 sections. Wow. So these are teachers who are just super dedicated people. And I think they started that way, to be honest, and just very dedicated. They care a lot about their students, and they meet specifically in a PLT to discuss strategies and ways to enhance their classroom to make it so that students who are English learners find success in their classrooms.
And can you briefly, sorry to interrupt, but can you also just explain what a sheltered classroom is for people who might not know that term?
Yeah, sheltered classroom is the teacher may have a certain percentage. We try to keep, we're still working on this because scheduling makes a huge difference. Our connection with student services, and they do a great job, but scheduling is very difficult to do, especially in a large magnet school. And we meet with them a couple times a year, and we talk about some of the things that we'd like to see happen if possible. You know, we'd like to see lower classes. We'd like to see, you know, some of the sheltered students that are maybe, we have some that have up to 10 sheltered, we have about maybe 10 ESL students in maybe in one class, and we have our ESL teachers push in, and then they support those ESL students. So our sheltered classrooms, they learn on a regular basis. They're learning different strategies in order to improve teaching and learning.
Great, thank you. Now, when we're thinking at the elementary level, how can we get stakeholders, various stakeholders in the school community involved at the elementary level? Emily, do you want to speak on that a bit?
Sure. So I think involving all stakeholders is really important, as you know, Joe was just describing. I think that one of the things that's important is to understand that you don't always know what you don't know. And as a middle-aged, middle-class white woman, I'm very aware of what I don't know. And knowing that I need to surround myself with people who can really support me in outreaching to communities that are not like me is really critical. So I think that when you think about that outreach, providing those opportunities for Latino families to connect with the school. And I think we've all mentioned various strategies that we have used to do that. But I think it's also important for us to have outreach to other populations within the school. I know that we had several kind of tension points with some of our affluent white families, for example, where families were really insistent that their daughters get a seat in Girls on the Run, rather than understanding that we needed to have balance in that club so that the club represented the school population. And that might mean that all the privileged white girls who wanted a seat in that club got a seat in that club, and having to say no, and here's why we're saying no, I think is really important in making those kind of administrative decisions. I also think it's important that the kind of activities and culture that you create in the school really need to support all families in feeling connected in some way. I remember our first year opening, and we had a big Hispanic Heritage Month celebration, and we didn't know how that was going to go off. And kids sang, they danced, we had community performers come in. It was a really beautiful event, a potluck dinner that was kind of crazy, feeding 500 people in one little serving line, big lesson learned there. But one of the things that I really remember vividly from that night was one of the dads leaving, and he was crying as he was leaving and saying to his wife, I never thought I would be in my child's school and feeling like my pueblo in Mexico. And I feel like that we created that environment for him in a school, in a place like Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I think creating those opportunities so that families who've never experienced that, and in our case, some of our, African and African American families, and then also some of our white families, they had not had those opportunities. And so they needed to feel like the other. And I think many times in mainstream culture, the dominant culture doesn't feel like the other. It feels like the one who's in control and in charge, and everyone else needs to assimilate to that culture. And in schools where we want to welcome Latino students, we need to make sure they don't feel like the other. And so we need to provide very intentional experiences so that other kids feel like the other and see the beauty in that. And so I think that's what we sought to create.
That's beautiful. Great. Thank you. Thank you. And James?
Yeah, excellent point, Emily. I second that wholeheartedly. I would say that there are a couple ways that you can create buy-in. I think that one of the things that I've learned in the 3 years I've been here is the power of showcasing data. Data is such a weird word because it has so many different meanings. But when you can create data and display it in a way that forces people to think like not numbers, but like pie charts, you really get people to question motives. And so I share that because one of the ways that we've been able to create buy-in from our stakeholders is that we showed them our listening project data. Emily talked about a couple stories. People connect to stories. And when you can put them in front of a presentation and you have a specific story about a student or family that was helped as a result of this project, they're going to feel more inspired to want to serve. And the last thing that I'll say is that when we did our listening project, we didn't just survey parents, we surveyed students. And the most powerful data that we received was that students just, in paraphrasing, but students just want their parents to recognize them for their academic successes. That not just Latino students, but a lot of our Black and the few white students that we have. And so when you can share with a stakeholder, this is what our students are saying. Our students want a soccer club, so we got a soccer club. Our students wanted to have free time, 15 minutes of free time on a Friday. We've not done that yet because we're instruction. I'm an instructional Scrooge in terms of the time, but we want to make it happen simply to let students know that, I think Joe might have mentioned this, that what you say is what we will try and respond to. You're not just saying words. We want to make sure that that we're doing our best to listen and then accommodate if we can. And then explain, one student said that he wished he had 4 recesses a day. We pulled him aside and explained to him that, you can't do that, and for other reasons, but yeah.
Great, thank you. So both you and Joe have mentioned using data, collecting data to improve student outcomes. Can you both talk a little bit about how that process worked, like just kind of the nitty gritty, if you were explaining to, if someone who is attending or who wants to present this possibly to their administrator, how would you go about actually implementing that? Like who are the people who are collecting data? How are you presenting it? What kind of things are you looking for? Can you talk a little bit through that process?
Yeah, at Enloe High School, I'm the assistant principal whose role it is to collect and make data available for the principal and for our administrative team. And we go through data typically in smaller groups by departments. At the beginning of the year, of course, we'll do one big meeting, but for the most part, we'd like all the faculty to dive right into it and take a look at some of our areas of struggle and to identify what they are and work toward meeting those needs. It's just the last couple of years, I would say last year, we were able to meet growth for our Hispanic population and our EL, English learner population. And we were very excited because we had not done that in a while. We were so excited this year to look at where we're going to be, and then we didn't have the testing to look at. And so I don't know if I've ever said I've been excited about testing before, but this year we really wanted to do it because we felt like we made some serious gains with these students, and you can really feel it. I know I'm talking about data, but you can also you can feel it in your building. You can feel those connections being made and the excitement with the kids and the teachers talking about it. And, we talked a little bit about the buy-in and commitment. We make sure that we identify and we show appreciation for teachers working with the students and regularly recognizing who they are. If I can just take one more second just to digress just a little bit. We're very happy with our student showcase. It's one way that students can take a project and then work with teachers. And then what they do is they bring the project into the media center and they set up for the day. And teachers, when they have an open period, can just walk right on through and see. And the students get a chance to be the leader and they get a chance to teach those people coming in. So data is huge. But at the same time, when you see it and you feel it in your building, that's very powerful as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great. Great. James, is there anything you want to add about how you how you guys approach data collection?
Yeah, I'll just say that being the keeper of data is a talent, Joe. So love and data can be overwhelming, especially if you don't know. There's context, and then you have to extrapolate and control for so many different things if you want to make it make sense to people that are consuming it. I'll just quickly add that when you talk about the nitty gritty of data collection, I think, first of all, we're a community school. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think what we got wrong is that we would identify a problem and we would go straight into developing action steps. And we quickly realized that we didn't spend enough time thinking about how to address it. So now what we do is we identify a problem. We then move to determining root cause. So we do this root cause analysis. Then we go to establishing goals and measures to figure out how best to address it. And then we develop action steps. When you go straight from identifying a problem to developing action steps, your data is going to be skewed. You're not going to be able to get anything that you can actually use. You may get a small percentage of information that you can use, but when you go all the way down to that root cause and you have your fishbone diagram, I mean, it's game changer. And so all that is to say that Lakewood Elementary has more data than we know what to do with. But a lot of the data is good because it speaks specifically to areas that both students, teachers, parents, and stakeholders have identified as things they would like to see or things they would like addressed.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good point, to have to get to the root to really truly solve a problem. Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of on that note, what are some of the challenges that your school has faced in working with the Latino population in your communities, and what kind of initiatives have you done, or are you working on, or still trying to figure out to overcome these challenges? Emily, can you start us off on that?
Sure. So one of the things, the challenges that we identified was the digital divide. And the digital divide existed across socioeconomic lines, and we found that many families had connectivity or some sort of device, but maybe not the knowledge on how to use it or how to use it in learning for their children. So some members of our PTA wrote some grants, and we had several donations to be able to start a technology class that families would attend, that were taught in Spanish for families from the very beginning: how to turn the power button on, how to log in, how to use a Google Translate button, how to navigate different programs that students used. And at the end of that 8 to 10 week parent education session, families were given a computer for their use the entire time their child was at the elementary school, along with a MiFi device if they needed it. And I know a lot of districts will have initiatives like that at the secondary schools, and our district did too, but it had not filtered down to the elementary school. And we thought that was really important in supporting our students in having the technology that they needed in the home. So that was one initiative that we had in place. The other thing we had was just opportunities to extend learning. So we had what we called a B3 after school program that provided homework help and tutoring support, as well as enrichment activities for students. And that was taught both in English and Spanish to support students in whatever language they needed support in. And then the summer programming provided full day sliding scales, summer school opportunities that were very similar to what we had during the school year, but also enrichment opportunities. So instead of trying to compete for the multitude of summer resources that are very expensive in our Triangle community for summer programming, we offered that in the school. As well as recreational activities. And for our English-speaking families, they enjoyed the opportunity to have summer opportunities in Spanish, but for us, the programming was really designed for our students not to have a summer lapse and have opportunities for that summer programming. The other thing that I think was really critical was having curriculum that was culturally relevant and responsive. All curricula had, in addition to content objectives, language objectives, and opportunities for students to have choice and voice and agency in the kind of activities that we were expecting them to experience to demonstrate their knowledge of the curriculum. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the Mariposas program that really looks at Latina leadership and growth and development that Barbie will share more about tomorrow has been a powerful program in supporting our girls in finding their seat at the table.
Great, thank you so much. I do have to kind of give a plug now, since you did mention culturally relevant materials for our Outreach Consortium program. I have to kind of plug a little bit. We offer book sets that teachers can check out that feature characters and stories from Latin America. So it's a really great way to incorporate Latin American studies into your class. We have all the way from the kindergarten to high school level. We have films and lots of lesson plans and materials on our website. So if you want to incorporate more culturally relevant teaching for Latino students, I'll give you some information for our website at the end. So thank you so much for sharing that, Emily. Joe, can you talk a little bit about what are we talking about? Challenges that your school has faced in working with Latino populations?
Well, we continue to have plenty of challenges, so that's I think it's a good thing because it keeps us working. But one of them is, and very similar to what Emily had talked about, is the digital world. Especially with the pandemic happening, and having the computer at the house, or having a hotspot, or and then are the students going to log in, and are they going to go to work? They're lots of times faced with those kind of choices, and we've kind of struggled communicating. So I mean, we use talking points as our main venue to go ahead and make those connections, and we offer regular training to teachers in hopes that they use talking points as well. People like that.
And I just want to just to interrupt you for a minute. Talking Points is an app that you can use to communicate with students and families, and you can write in one language, so you can text a family in English, and then on the other end, the family will receive the message in a language of their choosing. So, for example, when I taught, I don't speak Vietnamese, so I would type in English, and it would, by magic, it would translate the message into Vietnamese. So a Vietnamese student would receive it and get sometimes a kind of a rough translation, but they would kind of generally get the gist of what you're trying to say. But it's a really great app. I'll put it in the chat. It's called Talking Points. Yeah, sorry, continue, Joe. Sorry.
No, it's okay. What other challenges are in terms of the family academies, getting people there, and then discussing really, what do we want to have for presentations, and allowing enough time for questions, trying not to go into something thinking one thing when really your audience has other questions. We dove into something about college night, for example. We had a college night, how do you apply to colleges and that sort of thing. And then we had questions really about their child skipping school, so we had to just always be open for adjustments, because they know why they're there, but at the same time they may have other questions, and we have to take a step back and get those things answered. The biggest thing another big thing that we noticed was the students, trying to get them to think of themselves as learners, and in planning their curriculum, kind of tailor make it to what it is they may want it to be someday, and what some of the passions and gifts that they have, and try to really bring that out. We try real hard in doing that in our focus groups. The Power School, we try hard to make sure that all Latino families have access to Power School. They know how to log in. That's just something we just continue to do on a regular basis, so that they have access to grades. We also have interpreters that they spend a full day interpreting anything that a teacher wants to send home, or a call that they need to make. And because we do have a tough time reaching the parents, and we have a tough time with getting answers and updated phone numbers and that sort of thing. So that's just a kind of a work in progress.
Great, thank you. I'm sure a lot of people also have share those same problems as well. James, are there any sort of problems that you've identified in the Lakewood community, and what have you done or are working on to solve those?
Yeah, I think like Joe said, we have, with any population of student, right, we have challenges that can be frustrating to deal with. I think, in short, based on data that our families have shared with us, they want to feel like Lakewood Elementary School is a hub for the community. And I think that historically, it would only seem as if this is just a school, right? And a school is a place to just come, drop your kid off, pick them up, and they learn and they move on. We are wanting to create, obviously, like every other school, opportunities for parents to come and sit and join PTA meetings, have lunch with their kids, so that it's not just a school. This is my community rec center, if you will. Look, this is my third year at the school, and I'm gonna be a little vulnerable here. I always struggle with when I communicate, I don't always think to communicate in Spanish, or when I'm creating a newsletter. And it's very frustrating because I'm like, this is my third year. I should know better. And quick example, yesterday, we were working on a draft to post to our website about our schedule for COVID. And I didn't think to translate the schedule into Spanish for our Spanish-speaking families. And I felt like an idiot because I should know better. And so the challenge for me is continuing to stay conscious of my school's population and my family's needs. And it's frustrating because this is going into my fourth year, I should know this. But every time I want to communicate or disseminate information, with whatever venue, it's always, oh, did you get that translated? Oh, have you contacted the your front office bilingual secretary to record it in Spanish? And so that's a challenge that I have, which is frustrating. And I hope to eventually learn the language so I don't have to ask someone else to do my translating.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being honest and being vulnerable. It is hard to always kind of think outside yourself because you don't know outside yourself, right? It is kind of as you're showing, it takes a long time. But thank you for being willing to do that. I think it's really important, especially from, the top down to have that example for everyone in the school community to see that from their principal and assistant principals. So one last question I'll give. Yes, Joe. I've never actually seen the hand raised in person, so I'm like, oh, that's cool.
It worked. Well, I wanted to add to what James had said, because this is last year was my 30th year, and I've been at the district level. I've been at each grade level, K through 12. And those kind of mistakes continue to happen. I don't understand myself when that happens, but I try not to forget about any population. But I think after all this time, what it boils down to for me is those connections with the students and really continuing to get to know who they are as people. And when you do that, you tend to forget about those things a lot less. So, because they'll come out and tell you, why they're, if you ask, like we specifically asked our students, why do you think the Hispanic population has an attendance issue at our school? And then just shoot out answers at us in the focus groups, and just asking them, really helps, and they'll even say, well, my mom doesn't dare to come into the school. They'll make those kind of comments, and by asking it just helps us to, recall that when we really need to. Although the COVID is making it very difficult because information is coming in rapidly, and changes are happening, every day it seems like, and so you just have to just keep it on your mind. We're trying to create a one-stop shop where people can go in, and we want to make sure that it's all done in Spanish just as much as it is in English.
Yeah, it's definitely tough, especially in COVID. Yes, Emily, I can see the hand better.
Raise my hand. I think that listening to both James and Joe talk about, those mistakes, I've made all those mistakes too. I think what's so important and beautiful about their vulnerability and sharing those stories is that they have figured out that they've got to ask those questions and feel okay being surrounded by people who will give them that cultural context. And, whether you're analyzing data, whether you're figuring out a newsletter, a communication plan, parent education, professional development, anything, making sure that we have that cultural lens and surrounding ourselves with those voices that aren't always heard. And I know in my own whiteness, I know what voices I am not going to hear inside my own head. So I want to make sure that there are other people around me that I can hear from that can say, hey, Emily, you really screwed that up. That didn't go so well. Or you didn't consider this population, or, boy, the translation that went out was rushed and it was not the way it should have been done. It wasn't culturally or contextually appropriate. And so I think really feeling good about having those people that surround you and can give you that information no matter what you're doing as a leader in a school or as a teacher in a school, just to be able to bounce that piece off of is really important.
That's great. Yes, thank you. Anything else anyone else wants to add? You can just speak up. You don't have to raise your hand. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your honesty and for your time, for being here today. We're going to open it up to questions from the group. Perfect. We already have our first one. Before I do those, I skipped the Zoom etiquette reminders. I was so excited to get started, and everyone was doing such a great job with that. But if you do have questions, you can submit them in the chat, which is right in the middle of your screen at the bottom if you do have questions. And we have our first one, which is, do you think schools are sometimes giving too much to some minorities like Latinos, depriving students sometimes the joy of achieving goals within their own efforts? And are schools somehow creating a soft generation? Whoever wants to take that question. And I can repeat it as well.
Yeah, can you repeat? I'm having issues with my chat. I'm not able to see the questions, but
yeah, I should, get some water. Do you think schools are sometimes giving too much to some minorities like Latinos? So depriving students of the joy of achieving goals within their own efforts?
I got to be very
like, are schools somehow creating a softer generation by providing kind of these extra supports?
So I got to be very careful how I respond to this, because the way I received that question, so should we not be leveling the playing field for every student because we think that the resilience level is not going to be accomplished at the end? I respect the question. I respect the question.
And the person who submitted the question, feel free to chime in on the chat for any clarifying remarks on your question.
Yeah, I may have received it wrong. Can someone clarify that maybe?
So it's from what I understand, and Louise, feel free to kind of clarify your question as well. Is that by assisting, providing extra supports for students that they won't have the same amount, they want to have joy from achieving the goals because they've received assistance. That this generation might be a little softer, quote unquote, based on receiving this assistance.
Yeah, let me 20 seconds here.
Yeah.
I think as school administrators, and I don't want to speak for Emily or Joe, I think it's difficult to see it from that vantage point when we see it from an area of the inequity, the lack of resources, the lack of expectations that teachers have for them. And so I think I understand the question, but I think being a high school teacher an administrator for 16 years and an elementary school principal, it would only seem as if I want to give them more opportunities to find their struggle and to live in their struggle, to only come out of that struggle, if that makes sense.
I think I can answer too, or try to, because I am a believer that I'm an example of that, and talking about being vulnerable, but through the adversity in my life as a young person growing up, I've learned a lot about myself, and kind of really it kind of developed really who I am, some of the things that I had gone through. But at the same time, an example would be last year I had 4 or 5 students who were all first year in United States, and they all quickly made friendships, and they were running through one of the halls during class, and they tried to get into one of the classrooms, and they ran down the hall, down the stairs and all this, and then I got the message as an assistant principal that there were kids running in the hall and causing problems in the hall. So instead of a typical response might be, and I don't mean typical, but some may respond by saying, finding out who they are, which I did through through our video cameras, calling them in, and I could have just rattled off a discipline measure, you know, some sort of a consequence that made absolutely no sense at all. But you know, none of them meant any harm once I was able to get an interpreter in the room. Once I was able to actually talk about what they were doing. One boy had a crush on a girl. They got carried away. They're immature. They were trying out their friendships. I wasn't going easy on them, but I was understanding them better. I felt like I made a much better decision by listening to their side of the story about what they were doing, understanding them, introducing myself, explaining why it's important not to be running through the halls. I had no issues with them for the rest of the year. I would say they were some of my biggest fans, and I was some of their biggest fan. And the rest of the year were just, hey, Mr. Eno, and you know, and me, you know, just fist pumping them all year long, because they knew that I had displayed dignity toward them, and I knew for sure that they didn't mean any harm by really what they were doing. So I think that's the kind of response and the sort of thing I think about. I don't think I'm building softer people, but I think I'm creating maybe smarter people that way.
Right.
So I'll just jump in and echo what Joe said, and James as well. I don't think we're creating soft people. I think that by really listening, we're developing an understanding, and we're communicating to children who live in a mainstream, predominantly white middle-class culture, that there are people who care that might not look like them. And I think that really helping students to understand that, and also to understand how American education works. If you're first or second generation, or even third generation, your parents may not know how it works. And helping students themselves personally understand how it works, or helping families to help students understand how it works, is really important. And I don't think that creates softness. I think that's giving students what they need. And I think back to, you know, the picture where everybody's watching the baseball game, and you know, one kid can't see it, et cetera. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, and how we're now leveling the playing field and taking the fence down and all the other, as part of the analogy. We're giving kids what they need. And if we don't give kids what they need, then I don't think we're doing our job as educators. And I feel really passionate about making sure that these things get done for kids and for their families the way they need to.
Excellent. So we do have more kind of nitty-gritty kind of questions. So very quickly, Joe, you mentioned getting interpreters for a full day. How does that work, particularly in Wake County? I'll let you answer that, and then I have a quick question about budget for Dr. Bivins.
I'm not sure exactly how it works in other schools, but you know, a couple of years ago, we had a teacher who was given an extra, instead of a class, we had this teacher making calls home, and it worked out pretty well. This year, our interpreter is someone that we get from the district. So we make sure that we have some sort of a Google Doc that prepares the questions, and then reminders go out to teachers that let us know what you need to communicate, what kind of questions you might have, and then it kind of goes from there. I hope I answered the question.
And so there's, if I'm not mistaken, in Wake County, there's a form, correct, that you submit to the district, and I'm trying. It's been a while since I had to do that process. Yes. Yeah, so I think
we may have actually developed a specific day, twice a month, and done it that way.
Perfect, good. And Emily, what was the approximate budget for the summer school that FPG had, and where did you get the funding for that?
So I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was several $100,000, and we used a variety of funding sources. One of the funding sources was what the school district would have spent on the same students if they had been enrolled in the school district's traditional summer school program. So that might have been $69. It might have been at-risk funds that were from the federal, state, or local budgets. In addition to those funds to support the full day program, we wrote grants through the Family Success Alliance, which operates out of Orange County Health health department, and I think that every county has something similar to that agency. We also wrote grants to our public school foundation and to private funders. And then we also asked families to pay on a sliding scale. So for some families, they paid $5 a week. Other families, they paid $200 a week based on what they could afford to pay for the afternoon portion of the day that was not the academic summer school part of the day. So we really tried to blend various funding sources together. What would the district be paying? And what other funding sources do we have available to us through various grants and dollars that we could generate?
Perfect, thank you. And was that mostly an administrative project, or did you have other teachers and staff working on that as well?
Well, I think it was certainly a collaborative project where, staff is running the program. So they're writing, our coaches are working with teachers to write curriculum and to deliver that curriculum. And then we worked with the town of Chapel Hill to oversee and provide support to the afternoon portion, the recreational portion of the day, and then providing, the funding and all of those pieces and figuring out how all that goes together. I don't think if we had not come up with that solution as a school and figured out the funding ourselves, I'm not sure someone from our central office would have done that for us. I think it would have just been business as usual. In our district, everybody does Read to Achieve summer school in grades 1 through 3. So everybody is going to do that. Well, we knew that was not going to best meet the needs of our students and our school. So we needed to do something different. And in order to do something different, we needed to problem solve how that was going to get paid for. And my experience is that if you're going to go with a different solution to a problem, you better have all your ducks in a row to say, here's what we've done to solve that problem, or we haven't solved that problem. We're going to need your support with A, B, and C. So it really was very collaborative.
Excellent, thank you, great. We have another question. How would you suggest going about being more inclusive to Latinx students as a student services staff person in a school where there may not be much administrative support for such efforts? So if you're working in the office and you don't have principals such as yourself who are highly supportive, what advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, let me just quickly, so you got to show them the data. I mean, data does not lie. And I think as administrators, when we receive data, I feel like we have to question it, understand the context, but we have to take it at face value most of the time. And so if you have data to support that, Latinx students need more support, then it's undeniable. And I know it's a quick and dirty version of it, but I can say more, but I'll stop there.
So I'll just jump in and add, I know that you'll hear from Barbie tomorrow, but we didn't as a leadership team, as a school, sit down and say, oh, let's have a leadership group for our Latina girls. There were some stories and there were some data pieces that brought us to that. And I think we all were thinking different things, but as the school counselor, that was Barbie's brainchild, along with, collaboration with other teachers in the school. And she brought that to me. And I imagine that she probably had already started some grassroots things before she ever brought it to the table with administration. And she probably only brought it to the table because she needed a different level of support in advancing it more than what it was. So I think there are things that counselors and student support staff can do on the ground that are just part of their regular jobs that help our Latinx students and families feel connected, respected, their culture and language and status elevated. And part of that is just relationships and students interacting with you, knowing that you see them, you respect them, you love them, you want them to be successful. And that's just that human element of it that's really important.
I agree with both of them and wanted to just expand really what James was saying in terms of, if you really have to show, what the need is, you look at the data, and then you can also show, what the impact is that you're having by doing certain things. And most people can't argue with that. They won't argue with that. It could be part of the school improvement plan, and you're making those kind of connections. So I would definitely get it in your school improvement plan. how do you argue with that? So, but if you're working with someone who really isn't, who still isn't working with you on it, and that does happen. It's happened in my career. The school counselor, I believe, is the eyes and the ears of the school. So the principal would be remiss not to take full advantage of that. And a lot of people don't know that who are principals, but you have a connection with people that a lot of people don't have. And that should be something that's, be considered a real asset. So, I mean, I think we can't forget that as administrators, to take advantage of the different people within the school who have, different types of ways to make connections that other people don't. And the school counselor is someone that is that person, I think. So the best piece of advice I ever got was bob and weave. It's a boxing term, but eventually it's going to come around. So you may have to bob here, weave there a little bit, and then before you know it, you got a new principal or a new situation, and you're so happy about it, and you just keep rolling, but never give up.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for participating. Just some notes that this session has been recorded, and we're going to upload this to our UNC-DUKE Consortium YouTube channel at a later point, hopefully by the end of this month. There was no presentation, but if you would like to contact me for more information about anything or to reach out to any of our panelists, please email me here. You can visit our consortium website for some of those resources that I was mentioning. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Tomorrow, our session in the morning is arts-based practices for bilingual students. And then in the afternoon, as we've been hyping up a lot, Barbie will be presenting Mariposa's developing a civic empowerment program for Latinx youth. Please join us. You can use the same links to log on today that you can log on tomorrow as well. And if you would like to get a certificate of completion that you can use for CEUs, please go to go.unc.edu/administrators. I'm going to add this in the chat. And you can get a certificate of completion to receive CEUs. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to our panelists. That was excellent. I learned a lot. I'm sure you all did too. So thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.